Our viewers are likely aware from Telegram channels and news feeds, but I want to provide more context. It was a mountainous area, and the strike took place near a large local market, meaning that they were hitting just to cause damage, to cause losses, and as much destruction as possible. Fortunately, there were no injuries, no one was hurt. But if we talk about the second strike in Shevchenkivsky district, it's a miracle that it was a factory 250. I've already established that the last wave, 3 fabs, a whole body, hit the ground, the roadway, and the rails were damaged. The power line was damaged. But the main thing is that crazy, huge, and dangerous debris flew around, and the supermarket was very badly damaged. Many shops were damaged, several dozen, and all this next to residential high-rise buildings. Hundreds of windows were smashed again. We are awaiting updates from the City Council and municipal services on the extent of the damage. So far, they report that several dozen kiosks, shops, and a large supermarket have been severely damaged. Unfortunately, there are injured individuals. As of this morning, 11 civilians and 4 Interior Ministry employees who were on duty have received medical treatment. Currently, 4 people were hospitalized, but 1 has been discharged due to improved health. 3 remain in the hospital receiving medical care. Experts have identified the weapon used as a Fab 250. As of the evening, they were still assessing the site due to the large debris field. Military facilities will be reported on Telegram channels, but the accuracy of those reports is uncertain. The crater from this arrival does not look big, but the force is destructive, as you saw in the previous footage. The broken rails indicate the impact's force is tremendous. This is how the initial moments of our experts and police's work at the site look. Their response is quick and closely monitored due to the risk of repeated strikes. For instance, while driving to the site of the second strike in the Shevchenkivsky district, I didn't hear any sounds, but saw flashes in the sky. These were repeated strikes on the Kharkiv district again. I proposed to listen to the representatives of law enforcement agencies who were on the spot and gave the first comments about what it was, where it came from, and what kind of destruction there was as of the evening. In other words, the usual target for Russians is a supermarket. The second hit occurred in the Kolodno-Hirsk district near the central market, targeting a peaceful area. The third hit was in the village of Mala Danilivka near the private sector. It was previously stated that this was an aircraft munition, the type of which is yet to be determined. But I am not ready to say now. Here are the fragments of this munition in my hands. This is probably the planning module of this aircraft bomb, its wing, the tail section, and this is the shell of this aircraft bomb, which scatters after the explosion. This is its thickness, and after the explosion, smaller and larger fragments fly around, and people are injured by these fragments. I would like to emphasize once again that 3 people remain in hospital after this shelling. In addition, on the way back to Kolodno-Hirsk district, which was also under attack, women with acute stress reactions sought medical attention there. The strike occurred near a reservoir, which prevented the flying of shrapnel, although it did occur. But not only Kharkiv was under attack, the region suffered a lot. Again, we are talking about Dergachiv, Kupiansk, Zolochiv. If we mention the Kupiansk community, the village of Kivsharivka, attention is focused on the shelling. Last night, a 5-story building was hit, and almost one entrance was completely destroyed, smashed to pieces. It was a miracle that a woman was saved. She is 71 years old, but it is known that 3 people may be under the rubble, 2 women and a man. According to experts, the situation with the search is very difficult because the territory of the town is constantly under the threat of repeated strikes. This threat does not stop. The rescuers work intermittently because it is really very dangerous. We all know that repeated attacks on the rescue service happen frequently, and Russia resorts to terror. So while there is no information, not even an analysis of when the rescue operation can be completed, we have to wait and believe in a miracle. I repeat, the situation there is very complicated because the entrance has collapsed. The 5-story building was hit directly. It was hit with guided aerial bombs.
Може завершитися аварійно-рятувальна операція, там поки немає. Лишається чекати і вірити в диво. Але, повторюся, ситуація там, правда, дуже складна, бо під'їзд розсипався, влучання було просто в саму п'ятиповерхівку. Чим били по ній? Били ФАБом 500. Це тим, що...
Anna, what is the situation in Kharkiv in general? Because, for example, the Russians are constantly shelling Kharkiv, most often, as well as Kherson on the right bank of the Dnipro. The Russians aim to make civilian life impossible and cause deaths. Before the war, Kherson had about 300,000 residents. Now, only 80,000 remain, 60,000 of whom are pensioners. They are effectively forcing Ukrainians to leave their homes. What is the current population situation in Kharkiv? The numbers are statistical. How many people live in Kharkiv now? How many people live in Kharkiv? I don't have the latter, but I think we will definitely ask the city regional council to get it, but more than 1 million people, as it was, for sure. Here we need to talk about migration at the level of the region, at the level of districts. We have a lot of internally displaced persons from Kupiansk, from Vovchansk. We are talking about thousands of people, and even more, thousands and thousands of people. A lot of people from Donbass. For them, let's say it's a second or sometimes third move when people first left Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts to go to their regions along the border areas of Kharkiv Oblast, then moved deeper and deeper into their regions. Nowadays, how people live in Kharkiv, how the city lives, is both a complicated question and a simple question. After each arrival, if it's not night or curfew, they have utilities and emergency services working. In the morning, a big anthill begins at each arrival site to eliminate the consequences. People, for example, entrepreneurs, suffered a lot this time because dozens of shops, stores, cafes, hairdressers, and supermarkets, that is, where there were a lot of broken. And now they are boarding up the windows. People are counting the losses. And some of them, based on the experience of previous arrivals, will move to another neighborhood. Others will just board up the windows with jujube plates and put up an ad. We are working again. Come visit us. Neither the broken windows nor the lack of glass will prevent them from continuing their work on site. The only thing is that if the goods are damaged, if the equipment is damaged, and funds are needed for restoration, it stops more often for a while. It rarely happens that a person closes down completely. As for residential buildings, there are several groups of high-rise buildings that have been affected, and windows will be closed there. It's crucial to keep warm now, as it snowed for the first time in Kharkiv today, and temperatures are dropping. Quickly closing windows and ensuring communication is vital. A large group of repair services and utilities is on the ground to restore life in affected neighborhoods. Assessing the industry's situation is challenging, as they do not disclose where or how they operate.
тут мені дуже важко оцінити. По-перше, ніхто з них не афішує, де вони...
We can understand this because industry is an object, a target, unfortunately, for our terrorist neighbors. And if we talk about small and medium-sized businesses, there are a lot of them. You know, it's just commonplace that if a person scrolls through social media, there are a lot of advertisements for industries, such as the garment industry or footwear, which are made in Kharkiv.
Наприклад, шведська промисловість або взуття, які виготовляють в Харкові. І це такий собі...
And this is a kind of brand that we are here. We stay, we work, order, because every order is important to us. Do not take this as an advertisement, but simply as an indicator of what Kharkiv is all about. These are probably shoes, clothes, manufacturing. These are small businesses, but they exist. This is the food industry. First of all, the service sector, the social sphere, some educational and developmental institutions, sports facilities. Mostly small groups need shelters, but this is also true for children and teenagers. So that's a short and simple slice of the city's life. Anya, thank you. Why don't you advertise? We need to share how to navigate the challenging conditions in Kharkiv, especially this past week, which has been a nightmare.
28, 29, 31 число каби прилітають іскандери, тобто це просто тотально б'ється і нищиться місто, і в таких умовах, от ти розповідаєш.
In such conditions, people work to keep the country economically alive. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I would like to remind our viewers that Anna Chernenko, our correspondent from Kharkiv, was with us, and unfortunately, she told us about the events that the enemy shelled our city again. As for the North Korean troops, the first official report is that there were hits on troop formations. Ukrainian defense forces have attacked North Korean soldiers who recently arrived in the Kursk region of Russia. This was announced by Andriy Kovalenko, head of the Center for Countering Disinformation. The first DPRK troops have already come under fire in Kursk Oblast. This means that this is the first official announcement from the military and political authorities of our country about strikes on Koreans. Kovalenko did not provide any other details. Let me remind you that, according to South Korean intelligence, the agreement between the DPRK and Russia provides for supplies to the DPRK. Interestingly, 600 to 700,000 tons of rice per year, a salary of $200 for North Korean troops involved in the war against Ukraine, space technology, and agreements to involve the Russian Federation in combat operations on the Korean peninsula in the event of war. These are the arrangements of the strategic signed agreement between the DPRK and the Russian Federation. Moreover, if we talk about the number and quality of these troops, the main intelligence agency reported, and Volodymyr Zelensky also emphasized in his evening addresses, that as of the first of the year, there were already 12,000 North Korean troops. And the question of their ability to fight raises many questions, and we will talk about them now.
Запитань. Про них зараз будемо говорити. Суть в тому, що начебто вони ж навчалися десь в Росії, але як так навчалися.
The bottom line is that they allegedly trained somewhere in Russia, but they trained according to intelligence reports. And moreover, among these 12,000 are special forces, and they know how to fight in mountainous terrain, but they will not be able to navigate well in such footholds as the Kursk direction. And of course, there's the language barrier, and the coordination of some actions with Russian units is poor. The Russians have a mix of forces in the Kursk sector, including Kadyrov's men, the 155th and 810th Marines, and some prisoners. They've essentially gathered everything into one group, the Kursk pot. Now let's welcome our next guest, Alexei Hetman, a veteran of the Russian-Ukrainian War and Peacekeeping. Mr. Hetman, welcome to our program. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes. There is an official report of a hit on North Korean troops in the Kursk region. Mr. Alexei, how can we assess or predict the potential impact of these North Korean troops on the Russians there? I hope they don't cause harm. You've already mentioned the challenges the Russians face with North Korea, including communication and the military's ability to conduct combat operations. Many questions remain, and I don't want to repeat myself. How useful will the North Korean troops be to the Russians? They want to evaluate their effectiveness in both engineering and combat operations. If deemed useful, Kim Jong-un has stated they could add up to 1 million troops if necessary. While this is likely an exaggeration, the number of North Korean troops could still increase significantly. As for the special forces, there are many questions, because they have about 200,000 special forces in North Korea, which is more than any army in the world. And this does not mean that they are professionally trained. These people have to conduct constant training, improve their skills, and they require a lot of money because they are constantly using weapons. Constantly doing something to keep yourself in good condition and to be specialists, really special forces, is a costly thing, quite expensive. To have 200,000 with the kind of economy that North Korea has, and to think that they are maintained at the proper level is unlikely. I think they hardly believe that. Most likely, they just want to prove something to someone or scare someone in this way. They have so many people who can break something for the show, break some bricks, but it's not a fact that they are professionals, that they are better, or at least approximately the same as our special forces or those from other civilized countries. Even the Russian special forces are apparently much better than the North Koreans. But they may or may not do any harm. There is already a panic there. There are already fugitives. I want to believe that if their number reaches its maximum, that is these 12,000, they will be involved on the battlefield. A lot can change for the better for the Russians. Moreover, representatives of South Korea have already come to us to help us understand the mentality of these people and the logic of their fighting. How they are going to fight, what they are going to do to help us better fight back. And maybe, in some way, even bring these people to our side. Because the Russians can still be understood. They are pumped up with propaganda that we are bad and they are good. You can understand their logic. But what about the North Koreans? What is their motivation? It's hard to understand, so it's quite possible that we can come to an agreement with them. Let's say, gosh, that's not a good word. To agree on something. Let's see, you mentioned South Korea, and since the beginning of the full-scale reunification, it has never been, so to speak, neutral in its direct contacts with Ukraine. But now it may be sending some instructors to us. So you said that to clarify the mentality. Plus, their defense minister said that they are considering all options for cooperation with Ukraine, so he didn't rule anything out. Here, many military experts and observers say that there are positive aspects, that in fact, North Korea is a Klondike of ammunition, a Klondike of equipment. They have been accumulating these weapons for 70 years because they have South Korea at their side. If they decide to cooperate directly with Ukraine, we could receive a large quantity of shells and equipment. While I'm uncertain about the equipment, there will likely be many shells, as millions are available. Ammunition would be very useful, given that we use both Soviet and NATO calibers. North Korea likely does not have the same calibers as either Soviet or NATO. It would be very nice. In addition, this is a high-tech country, and even if it wasn't shells or lethal weapons, but at least electronic warfare and communication equipment that we need, it would be very good. And if there is some other equipment, I have the impression that it is not a certainty that we will get the equipment, but, I hope it doesn't happen like with those American tanks. 30 tanks is not bad, but it's nothing. 1 million shells are better. Alexei, what you say in the east of our countries, the main fighting is in the former Volодарsk bridgehead towards Kurakovo. The key settlement is Kurakovo, which the enemy is trying to press from 3 sides. From Pokrovsk in the north, from Vuhledar with frontal attacks. Whatever the situation is, at least they are losing a lot of equipment and manpower. We always talk about it, and we know that the Russians don't care. But as of October 2nd, it was estimated that the Russians left 208 pieces of equipment on the battlefield during the last attacks. This is important. The fact is that they have no problems with people, relatively speaking. If anything, the Koreans will help, as they believe. But they have a negative balance of heavy equipment. They are producing and can pull out of strategic warehouses. They have pulled out almost everything. They have less equipment than they are losing, and they cannot do anything about it. They can't build speed, they can't bring back another plant. They can't build something, and there are a lot of questions. That is, the balance of equipment, especially tanks, is negative. The number of heavy equipment they have is constantly decreasing. They have increased their production and can manufacture about 20 to 25 tanks per month. They can also withdraw a maximum of 50 tanks from strategic storage, specifically T-34 tanks, which are still in service in North Korea. Modernizing old tanks could yield an additional 50, bringing the total to 60. That is, let's make a slight exaggeration of the margin, as they say, for unreliability. They can supply, in terms of second reliability, about 70, 80, let's say 100. So they can supply 100 tanks to the front line per month, no more. We took this figure with a big exaggeration. In reality, 70, 80. They are losing more. Let's calculate how many they lose every day, according to the General Staff's report. That's why the balance is negative, and the number of heavy equipment is decreasing. That's why they are demanding from their generals that Putin announce at least a partial mobilization, which he categorically refuses to do. They are trying to compensate for the lack of such equipment with the manpower of the people they are throwing into these so-called strong assaults without sparing. That's why there are 280 vehicles. Here's the situation. Let's assume that they need to work for 3 months to renew this equipment alone. If we take into account this, I think light equipment can be taken into account. It's fine if it takes 2 months to restore what they lost in this area alone. Alexei, speaking of other areas, what I see on the map, and according to reports, the Siversk direction is becoming hot. There, the Russians are trying to advance to the Chorny Zherebets River near the settlement. And this Siversk, which has been standing very well for a long time, does not allow the Russians to move at all. They are currently trying to form convoys of equipment. Just yesterday, they were deployed in Ivano-Dorivka. The Kupiansk direction is one of 2 key footholds where the Russians will be actively working alongside the south. Overall, the Kupiansk, Southern, and Zaporizhzhia directions represent the enemy's attempts to continue their offensive while maintaining tactical initiative to capture as much territory as possible. However, no army can sustain continuous offensive actions without a pause to prepare for the next phase. These preparations have been ongoing since the end of last year, and their resources are running out, necessitating a halt to regroup. The increase in Russian troops in the northern and southern areas is due to the movement of troops rather than secret reserves. Convoys are being deployed along the front line to identify weaknesses in our defense and maximize manpower and equipment in those areas. This is a standard military tactic aimed at achieving numerical superiority at specific points along the front. This is what an army does, even if it is smaller in number than the enemy's army throughout the war. But thanks to maneuvering, it can concentrate forces in one place and achieve certain advantages. The Russians have a numerical advantage, which simplifies their operations as they concentrate on different areas. However, this also means they relieve pressure and reduce manpower, equipment, and artillery in other parts of the front. Therefore, we understand and see this, and we have to react to it and plan our defense actions. However, again, we come back to the fact that we are much smaller in number than our enemies. And in order to hold the line and not retreat, we need, among other things, people to hold these weapons and fight. Recently, the Secretary of National Security and Defense announced plans to mobilize another 160,000 people in the near future, which could mean within 3 months or by the end of the year. This is intended to create new units and restore staffing levels. The goal is to ensure that combat units reach at least 85% of their required personnel. This is almost the first time it has been officially recognized, and I don't understand why it was kept quiet, because everyone understands the situation perfectly well. No one denies it, but it hasn't been emphasized that much. This means that we want to add more people to reach at least 85% of the full-time staff. This shows that there are fewer of them now. And where there was a brigade, it is no longer a brigade, but a half brigade, or a battalion or 2 battalions. This also needs to be taken into account, and we are watching those who are trying to analyze, not just watching this war, as they say, on TV. Unfortunately, we are not alone in our loss. And this was stated by the NSDC secretary after the meeting, that the security rate should be increased to at least 85%, because no one is talking about 100% anymore. This is another reason why we have to withdraw. The name of the brigade is there, the name of the unit is there, but the number of people is no longer what it should be, according to the staffing table. Unfortunately, the Russians have become more active in the south, with advances in the last 2 days near Robotin and the Robotin salient, where Ukrainian counteroffensive actions began last year. They are likely aiming to threaten Zaporizhzhia. As The Economist suggests, they want to move within artillery striking distance. The fact is that Robotino was the Tokmak direction, and we tried to approach, but we failed to overcome the Syrovitin lines, which were very well built. We did not get the weapons we were promised. so our offensive actions were not as successful as we would have liked.
Такими вдалими, як нам хотілося б, але вони хочуть відсунути нас на роботі для того, щоб ми знаходилися як можна далі від залізниці, там Волноваха, Токмак, Мелітополь, Джанкой, які вони користуються, щоб ми не мали можливості.
The Russians are trying to push us back at Robotino so that we are as far away as possible from the railroad that runs through Volnovakha, Tokmak, Melitopol, Jankoy, which they use, so that we do not have the opportunity to shell it with artillery fire. And of course, to get as close as possible to our settlements, so that they could not only attack the territory with missiles or drones, but also get close to an artillery shot. Regarding Robotino, this is for the first month. This reservation is correct, but not for the first year. They are trying, but so far they have not succeeded. There is talk of leveling the front line. When they say level the front line, it is necessary if you have a ledge so that there are no attacks on the flanks and the unit that has moved forward is not cut off. If you don't have a ledge, why do you need to level it? There is no danger. So these talks about leveling the line may be aimed at not stretching their troops. On the other hand, they want to stretch them out in defense, and our positions will become even smaller. They want to push us further away so that we don't shell the railroad hubs, because the railroad is one of the main logistical arteries for Kherson's southern group and for Crimea. So of course, they want us not to look ridiculous. When there is a protrusion, it makes sense to straighten the line, and when there is no protrusion, why straighten it? It's just trying not to look ridiculous. Thank you for this conversation, for finding the opportunity to talk about the front and about performances and alignment.
Немає що пропочати, все вірно. Олексій, дуже дякую вам за цю розмову. Дякую, що знайшли змогу проговорити по фронту, звичайно, ну і про виступи.
This is very important for our viewers to understand. First of all, we were joined by Oleksiy Hetman, a veteran of the Russian-Ukrainian War and reserve major. I'll pause here, and in the next hour, share which 5 countries support Ukraine and the results of a survey among their populations.
населення цих країн.
See you.